Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Valerie from Action Zone. Very excited to have you guys join us because we have a very, very special guest, one of mine and Rosie's favorite people on the planet. He's so amazing. But before we get started talking to Dr. Carlos Garcia, several announcements. One, if you haven't seen on our social media, we have great news. We have been selected again for a contract with Veterans Florida to support veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs. We have scholarships available. Applications are currently being accepted. Our next cohort starts April 5th. I'm sorry, month of May in. Um, October 5th, 2024. So get those applications in so we can review them and see who's going to qualify for scholarships. If you don't qualify for scholarships, we'll accept you anyway. So really excited about that. Definitely follow us on Eventbrite. You'll see a bunch of really cool things coming up. We have some workshops. I'll go over them at the end, but we also will be partnering with VetNet for their networking event coming up as well. So without further ado, Dr. Carlos Garcia, how are you this morning?
Good, Val. So good to be here with you. I know it's been a minute since we've connected.
Yeah, especially in person. Of course, I follow you on all your media outlets, which is why I wanted to have you on today. So why don't you tell our audience, Rosie likes to call them the Zonies, introduce yourself, tell them a little bit about your background, and then we'll go into all the nitty gritty.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, Dr. Carlos Garcia, and I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served in the Marines for about 7 years as an infantry Marine. And then I transitioned into work as a fireman and paramedic after that. And I did that for almost 7 years as well. Seems like I have this 7 year period of sort of moving on to
They
other
call
things,
that the 7-year itch.
the 7 year itch. Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely loved doing that work, but then just kind of got to this place in my life where I saw myself doing something a little bit different. So then I went to grad school to get a doctorate degree in clinical psychology, with the hopes of really just kind of using all of this experience I had in the past to bring more wellness, both mental and emotional wellness to the forefront. And then, sort of after getting my degree, um, went into the clinical psychology space, working as a therapist and a counselor. And then, found you guys, right? Action Zone. And I was like, yeah, I'd definitely love to do my own thing one time. So I went through Action Zone's program, um, really sort of gained some good knowledge base and understanding about how to be an entrepreneur. And I started my own practice, which it's been about 7 years. So I'm starting to get that itch now again. But yeah, one of the great things was, I kind of took all of these past experiences and my passion of working with leaders and business owners, and have sort of developed a niche in working with those kinds of folks.
Awesome. Well, and I guess your 7-year itch is you wrote a book.
I did.
So kind of expanding a little bit on your practice, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, you were in, I think, our second cohort after we had launched in 2018, and what an amazing class that was.
Really
I
was.
mean, heavy hitters. I think we had 4 PhDs in that class.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and not all like that, most people would assume in the military, if you're an officer, then you would go to, college and get a PhD, but
Right.
that wasn't the case. We had a good mix of both enlisted and officers that went on to get their PhDs to, really continue to serve in the chosen industries.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah,
was
and
such a great group.
it really was. I mean, everything from, youth psychologists to farmers and, um, you know, uh, apps. Yeah, it was just an amazing class. So, and Rosie and I talk often, about Action Zone, and your answer to one of our survey questions is a quote that we use all the time.
Mhm.
You said that after Action Zone and having that little switch, that entrepreneurial mindset switch, that you now saw your clients as customers as well, which helped increase your the number of customers, clients that you took on, and your revenue. And I think it was 30% in the first 30 days. So That's just our goal. It's just, that little switch,
So
when everybody's going through our cohort. So that's great.
yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. It's actually really interesting because as a lot of the folks that come and work here at my practice, they have sort of a vision of they have a clinical background, right? They're coming in as counselors, as psychologists, but they have a vision of potentially having their own business one day. So part of the reason they come through here is to sort of gain some of that knowledge. And it's interesting. It's interesting about how even in our discussions now about how we're marketing, how do we advertise, how we put our message and branding out, to our customer, we have to navigate that conversation, right? Because ultimately there are clients or patients, if you want to in certain circles talk about them that way. But when you have to turn on that sort of business mentality, you have to switch that sometimes so that you understand from a business perspective, like how do we get those folks here to our office?
Yeah, through the years, we've had to really work with several of our founders to, 'cause, like in the military, or those that choose to go into the military, even if they didn't realize it going in, coming out, they have gained this servant heart. They want to just serve the community, serve each other, mankind, however you want to put it. And so when they become young founders, especially founders of nonprofits, they're like, we're not in this for the money. And our nonprofit founders, I'm like, well, then you've already like closed your doors because even
Right.
nonprofits have to make money.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a different type of effort,
It's a shift. It's back to what you said. It's a mindset shift, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, our practice is totally here in the service of serving our community and better mental health and all of that. But if folks don't know we're here and don't know how to reach us and don't know how to come to our door, then we can't serve, right? In the ways that we.
Right. hmm Yeah, and with our for-profit founders like realizing that your you as the individual, the founder, the clinician, the subject matter expert, whatever role you play in your company, um, it's a business. So your time is valuable, product or service that you're offering is valuable, and working to help founders realize the monetary value of what they're offering. It's sometimes too, it's that, like we said, it's just that little mindset switch to realize that um, you can make money while serving. you know
Absolutely.
yeah, because if you're not doing
Yeah.
you're not
And
going to be
and
able to
that
scale.
I think also shifting sometimes the mindset around money, right? And what's its value, what's its purpose. One of the big moments for me was this sort of teaching moment where it was like, yeah, I get it. You want to sort of serve as many people as you can, and you want to do that in a way that feels that everybody has access to your service, and in a way that feels where even what you're charging feels ethically okay. But also, like the more money coming into your business, the more people you can serve, right? So from that lens, then how do you strategically place your services, how much you're charging for those? I mean, it's an in-depth conversation, but I think it goes back to what you were saying. Sometimes if we can't shift that little mindset, have that shift in perspective to be like, oh yeah, then we don't even open ourselves up to those conversations.
Right, right. And I think it is really lost on many folks in our country that small businesses are really what drive workforce development. We are a huge part of building those programs and hiring the folks that come through those different types of workforce development programs and trainings. So it in order to continue to employ, as we build our business, we bring on customers, clients, patients, and then in order to employ people so that we can scale and grow, is really it's all about money.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to have it. You have to have the for those greens in order to,
It needs to be a part of it, right?
yeah.
One of the things you just said there really sort of brought me to this other idea, which is another shift that I've made for myself internally about value, right? Like, yes, sometimes that value is monetary, but what other value are we providing? So, one of the places that I think about that, and anybody that goes into sort of the building a psychology practice knows, like, right, like I'm not retiring off of this. There isn't just a ton of money. I mean, even if you had 3 or 4 offices, I mean, you could do well, but it's not like other businesses, right? But the value, what's the value we bring? Like I think about, for instance, in terms of value, like the number of therapists that I have trained who have gone out and started their own practices over the last several years, right? The value that I've given of myself of teaching them how to be good therapists and good counselors, right? And now they're pouring that into their clients who are becoming healthier and going out there and doing better things in their community. So yes, sometimes the value is monetary, but sometimes when we shift and realize that the value is in so many other ways, like at the end of the day, that brings me a lot of peace and a lot of happiness that I'm pouring out value in all of these other ways, not just monetarily.
Yeah, and I think that's the one of the beauties of small businesses is that we tend to be way more invested in our employees because it's such a small group, a small organization. It's much more intimate. And not to say that working for corporate is necessarily bad, but there's so many employees, and your span of influence, no matter how large a company is really only 5 to 7,
Totally.
and that's pushing it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it really is. I really appreciate that value part, you sharing that with everybody. So in your now that of course we kind of watched you settle into this niche of helping small business owners and entrepreneurs. Talk a little bit about kind of that evolution and how you help uh, founders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, whatever their titles they carry in their business ownership journey.
Yeah, great question. So it all started in 2018, actually, when I started to come across a ton of articles as I was doing some research on CEOs or business owners, right, and anxiety, and CEOs and depression, and CEOs and suicide rates. And one of the things that really stood out to me is that there was a lot of parallels actually in terms of how these type A high powered folks manage their mental and emotional health. And it wasn't too far off from what I had seen with first responders and with veterans, right? It's just kind of the way that we're conditioned and wired to, just kind of continue to push through, to not really look at how emotions play a role in our day-to-day lives. And so I got really interested in looking at that information. And inevitably, what I saw is, in addition to these parallels of how we tend to struggle in these roles, the same ways that we can also tend to benefit. So, one of the things that has been super valuable for me, Val, is to um, the whole reason I got into the practice of psychology was because I was navigating anxiety and depression for a lot of years in my own life. And therapy was a thing that really helped me shift my mindset, learn how to process my emotions in a completely different way. Like it changed the entire ball game for me. So with that, I was like, wow, if I can go and become a therapist and learn how to help other folks to do the same, then that would be awesome. So, I really sort of took these experiences again as a Marine, as a former firefighter, and even in my own journey as an entrepreneur, to just bring all of this experience and be like, wait a second, if we can look at the places where we get stuck in terms of mindset, in terms of psychology, and start to develop some real tools that these achievers can utilize in their own lives, not only personally, but professionally, to make themselves more successful. I mean, whatever that may look, monetarily, better relationships, running a better business, then I think we need to hear that information. Now, my first challenge in that was that these groups that we're talking about were not always the most open to reaching out for help, right? So that's a
Right.
big thing, especially not from a counselor or things like that. So I saw my work as one of having to get out there and really speaking on this topic and letting people know about the value of looking inward and really understanding oneself from this core place. So, I put together a presentation that was called The Psychology of Being an Entrepreneur. I know that you're familiar with it because it's kind of been in the Tampa area in a couple of different forms. But it was really awesome because I just saw like business people and CEOs and executives really take to it. And it was really this understanding of, yeah, not just mindset things, but how we manage our stuff, how we need to sometimes look at our past experiences and the traumas and the things that we've been through to know how to navigate that from a mental health perspective so that we can be better leaders, better CEOs, run better companies, have better relationships within our organizations, right? Um, and so those talks out in the public led to people starting to come in and see me, right? Like, which was really beautiful because it meant that like this invitation I had put out there about, hey, you should really look at yourself deeper was really taken, it was taken seriously, and people were coming in and wanting to take a look at themselves more seriously. And over time, I just started seeing more managers and business people come to my office to really do the deeper work. And just like watching them flourish, Val, like not only in their personal lives, but like feeling more confident in themselves, working through perfectionism, working through imposter syndrome, growing more confident in the ways that they were showing up as leaders and as bosses, and having their company thrive as a result of the work that they were doing. And so it's been beautiful. It's been beautiful to watch just folks really sort of take to this information and see the value in doing some deeper therapeutic work on themselves.
I love that because you don't know this is used ad nauseum, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And when you have, like you mentioned, that A-type personality and couple that with the responsibility of all these people,
Yeah,
with the military, we're not just responsible for the soldiers that we lead or accomplishing the mission. We're responsible for their entire family.
yeah,
And moving on to first responders, I don't know if it's fully that same type of culture with responsible for the entire family in the first responder world, but for me, with my business and with Luminary, this is one of the things that I say because first responder is one of my customers, is that while PTSD is not isolated to the military community, as the media has sensationalized it, right? And my heart goes out to first responders because they're on shift, 12 hours or whatever it is, 24 hours, and then they experience some sort of or they witness some sort of trauma, which then they might experience a trauma, then they go home. So they have to turn it off, compartmentalize it, and then turn it back on or go back to the shift the next day or whatever. I just yeah, first responders, I don't feel like we take care of their mental health as much or focus on it as much as we do the military.
yeah,
And then with CEOs and senior executives, the burden of being responsible for the company and the revenue and all of the people, it is just yes, I see it, I witnessed it, I feel it personally, all of that. It's
yeah.
yeah, mental health is really important. And when I had my first company, it was a veteran staffing company. I don't know if I had ever shared that with you. And I thought, I'm Valerie the veteran, and I'm going to help you hire veterans because that's what you say your company wants to do.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I would get questions like, what about PTSD? Can they assimilate to the company culture? And I was like, why are they asking these questions? This is so crazy. So I stopped introducing myself as Valerie the veteran
Yeah,
and let that come out organically in the conversation. And I would get this, well, you seem normal. You don't seem like you have PTSD. And I'm going, are you serious? Like, this is crazy. So I've been much
yeah.
more open and vocal about it.
That stigma is still there, and I think that that's a part of why I'm so passionate about going out and constantly speaking in this topic wherever I'm given a platform, right? We still have this idea that seeking any kind of support and even the term mental health already has this sort of negative something is wrong with you
Yeah.
thing. And what I'm trying to get out here and tell people is like, look, we're all going to go through difficult things. It's about learning healthier ways of coping and working through those things, right? And so, like for me, um, yeah, obviously, if you're struggling, you want better sort of strategies. But even like if you think you're doing well, there's things you can learn about yourself to get you to be at a higher level, right? Performance wise, whether that's being a better husband, wife, father, mother, leader, boss, employee, whatever it is. But you're right, we still have a lot of stigma there. So that's why people ask questions like that, because there's this implied something is wrong with you if you're seeking help or have had trauma in your life. When the truth is, it's quite the opposite. Um, it's not a matter of the hard things that we experience or the traumas that we've been through. All of us are going to have that at some point. It's how we learn to manage it. And so, what I'm wanting to get people to realize is acknowledge that that is there, not as a negative thing in your life, but as a thing that you can use to fertilize yourself, to become more resilient, to learn how to be better in all of the aspects of your life. Because hardship is what makes us grow. And so, we don't have to constantly look at that as something that's negative.
Yeah, when you seek, it doesn't have to be like permanent. It's you might just need that third party, non, biased person just to hear you out and maybe ask questions to give you a different perspective about the way you're feeling, and kind of navigate through that.
Yeah. It's funny if I reflect on like one common theme, since I've been doing this work as a psychologist, like most of the people that come to see me, they're actually like take on so much. They're like the person in their family and their jobs. They're the friend that everybody comes to. They take on so much that that's the reason that they're struggling, because they have
Mm.
this narrative that they shouldn't be, and that's where they're like caught. It's like they do so much for, they're actually so strong, but they
Mhm.
have this belief that they're not, because they're not stronger, right? And so
Right.
that has a lot to do with the families we grew up in, the sort of
Mhm.
narratives that were in our culture, right? Like, I can just kind of use as an example, I grew up in a Hispanic home, so like, boys don't cry, they don't have emotions, right? Like, hey, you're human, you do have emotions, I don't care how tough you think you are, right? So like,
Yeah.
why don't we learn to navigate those things instead of constantly pushing them down, which is then what gets us to sort of struggle.
Right. And when you're in tune with your own self, your own feelings and emotions, it makes you have stronger relationships, not only with the people in your life, but your employees. Since we're talking about founders, CEOs, and executives, you have more understanding, more sympathy, more empathy, and you'll be able to lead and work with that employee, and they're going to be much more productive, which, in the end, is going to help the company.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
backbone of emotional intelligence, right? Is first being able to see and regulate oneself before we're, out there as leaders trying to help
Mhm.
others do the same.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So let's talk about your book because that was super exciting when I saw the announcement.
Thank you.
How long, or yeah, tell us or take us along the journey of you now being Dr.
Yeah.
Carlos Garcia, the author.
Oh my God, I know. Just hearing it still sort of gets. Um, yeah, I mean, I think this is a journey I've been on. There's been several fail. I'm just really honest about sort of what this process has been. There's been several failed attempts at that book. So people that are like, "Oh my God, you wrote a book." I was like, "No, this thing's been trying to get written for years, right? It's just
Mhm.
that now I finally, things sort of came together. I had the time. I just the drive was there to really, publish it and get it out there. But yeah, the book is called The Unseen Journey: Awakening Curiosity and Trust in the Corporate World. And it's really what we've been talking about. I say that it's an invitation for corporate America to go to therapy, right? And so,
Mm.
really, what I do is I sort of talk a little bit about my own journey and how I've used sort of therapy and that doing that inner work to become better at everything I do, to find success in a very different way that wasn't just sort of tied to validation and monetary value. It was a way of looking at myself to, um, just to work on myself, right? And through that process, sort of throughout the chapters, what I do is I use like a psychological principle that people can sort of use. You were talking earlier about we don't know what we don't know. For me, all of psychology is about becoming aware of things that we're not aware of. And what do I mean by that? By the time most of us are 10 or 11 years old, we've already been so deeply unconsciously programmed by our parents, our homes, culture, society, schools, teachers, and we're not even aware of it. We take all of this programming into adulthood as truth, as just the way things are. We've never actually stopped to question a lot of our internal beliefs, opinions, attitudes. And so for me, therapy was this beautiful opportunity to really look at those things by putting my ego aside and just doing the hard work. So in the chapters of this book, I help people see how they can ask themselves questions that can help bring that unconscious stuff to the surface. Fear, um, you know, humility. What is your narratives around what you're capable of and not capable of? If you grew up in a home where you were constantly told to, not shine too much, right? Or, you had to be the sort of emotional caretaker for a parent that drank too much, or, you were constantly ridiculed by your father for not being enough, whatever. Like all of that stuff goes into our unconscious programming that we later take on, and it builds our beliefs that we have about ourselves. And sometimes none of us have ever sort of stopped to question that. So the book is about giving you tools to start doing that inner questioning, and through that process, your own journey coming to light to like, oh wow, like imposter syndrome, for example. Oh, I see that I grew up maybe in a house where, everybody was super driven and my parents were doctors and lawyers. So my sort of sense of validation in the world comes from what I can achieve or what I can do. Well, great. That's important for you to know. Right. And so I can, go through these sort of different scenarios that we all have when we're growing up to really start to understand our programming a lot better. And from that place, like when you have a playbook for how you show up in the world, and you start to tweak some of those plays and tweak some of the ways that you think about things, now you're shifting entire mindset things about yourself. Now you're changing like entire perspectives that you have about the world, and you're getting rid of all of the unhelpful programming. That's what this is about. Not to sit there and just look at like, oh, this was horrible about me, or I had this trauma. Yes, that may be there, but it's so that you can learn to have a different way of looking at yourself in the world and other people, so that you can start navigating the world from a much better place, whatever that may mean to you.
Yeah, so start looking at yourself differently than trauma or the programming that you feel is who you are.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. Or that you've
Great.
come to feel that it is who you are. I'll just kind of use a quick example to share, what I mean. I grew up in a house with, and this isn't against them. I love my parents, and so much of what they did for me. But I just had a very impatient father. Right? He was, immigrant, came to this country. He came from a father with very little tolerance for mistakes around the home. It was just this very disciplinary sort of environment. So kind of what I always heard as a child growing up was this message like, no matter what you're doing, it just wasn't enough, right? It's like, you got the wrong tool, you idiot, or stop dropping your food. It's just constant negative message about the self. And then a mother who's just highly opinionated, right? That's just my Hispanic Cuban mother. She just had an opinion about everything. And often that opinion was in contrast to the one I felt I had about myself. And then I had an older brother who was like the golden child. He just kind of, everything landed and was just perfect for him in his life. So in the environment that I perceived as a child growing up, nothing about me was ever enough for the people around me. So that's why I became a perfectionist. That's why I went into the Marine Corps. I had to be the toughest. That's why everything in my life was this constant raising of this relentless standard for myself, which in some ways it was good, right? It pushed me, but in a lot of other ways it was a hindrance, right? Because there was this constant narrative unconsciously that no matter how much I accomplished in the world, it wasn't enough. So in the first chapter of my book, I talk about how I got through the Marine Corps, I got through the fire academy, I went through paramedic school, I was a fireman. I had all on the outside, I had all of these amazing accomplishments, but on the inside, I was struggling with depression because I never felt like I was enough in the world. Right. And it was this moment through therapy that I was like, oh, well, this isn't actually about what I'm accomplishing or getting done. This is actually about my perspective around myself. And the scary part was like, if I keep taking this narrative with me, it doesn't matter how big of a business or how much success I have in the world, it will never be enough. So changing that narrative sort of helped me to see that my striving in the world no longer had to come from a place of validation, but one of passion, one of giving back, one of service, one of valuing the work that I do, if that makes sense.
And I guess that switch came at a perfect time now that you are a father. Your son is still very young. He's gorgeous. Keep posting pictures. Yeah, so that's wonderful. Um, well, I know we are on a time crunch because you have patients you got to get to. So, what is one last parting piece of advice? Oh, wait, before you said that, is your
Yeah.
book more, is it like a workshop or a workbook or kind of stories?
Yeah, no. So there's just a story about my own experience in the first chapter. This is really a book for the people. Like, essentially, each chapter goes through like a psychological principle, and then at the end, it poses questions, and it is kind of like a workbook. At the end, there's a series of questions for you to ask yourself and about your journey, so that you can start to self-reflect and see how these things show up in your life. It's really, again, about building that curiosity within yourself to go to that next level of success for you. So, yeah, it's really sort of like a workbook in a lot of ways, Val.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so one piece of advice for our listeners, our zonies, and then how do they either come to Tampa Wellness for help, and how do they get the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think one tip is right, like never lose the passion to keep learning about yourself. No matter how many years I've been coached or gone through therapy, right? Like I'm still on that road to better understand myself, right? The places where I get frustrated, the places where I lose my patience, like why does that show up in my life? Where can I be a better leader? Always asking the important questions, always putting yourself in a place that makes you feel challenged, right? And so that would be sort of my little tidbit for folks out there. Keeps challenging yourself endlessly. Yeah, so you can find the book on Amazon. Again, it's The Unseen Journey: Awakening Curiosity and Trust in the Corporate World. Um, if people are in Tampa and are curious about sort of wellness services, they can go to Tampa Counseling and Wellness.com. And pretty soon I'll be launching sort of a rebranded version of a new website where I'm going to have more stuff on speaking and corporate work, and that's going to be drcarlos.com.
Okay, so you're going to be going out and doing a lot more speaking.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
the 7 year itch, right? So now it's like I want
yeah,
to go to the office, start getting out there and doing some things differently.
that's wonderful. We are so just thrilled to watch your success, not only
Thank you so much.
professionally through your business, but personally with your young growing family, which is just amazing. His hair is just as amazing as yours.
Thank
Well,
you so
before we
much, Val.
close, I want to let everybody know we've got several things coming up. Pop Up Like a Professional is on September 19th. Pitch to Win workshop is on February 12th. Both of those are at the Entrepreneur Collaborative Center. We have the cohort coming up, as I mentioned, so we have some Q&A sessions that are coming up. You can go to our Action Zone Eventbrite, which I'll drop in the chat to see the dates and times that those are happening. Um, September 18th, we will be sponsoring the VetNet networking event at Brick House on Kennedy. So join us there. And then we have a couple other workshops coming up. Take Action workshop series starts this month with wealth management delivered by Carnell Moore, who is also an Action Zone alumni, and then Combat to Cash. Um, our friend Harmony at Sandbar Advisors is going to be helping you guys with understanding your cash flow, which is really important.
Yeah.
So, Carlos, thank you so much. Made my Monday or made my day to be able to hang out with you. I get confused because we used to do these on Mondays, but
Yeah.
always wonderful to spend time with you.
Thank you, Val. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me on, and just keep doing the wonderful work that you all are doing.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.